Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Whistle of Revenge, Sherlock Holmes and Irene Adler Mysteries Book 4 by KD Sherrinford. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. The advantage of any long-term relationship was that after settling into a stable and at times predictable routine, the man you can adore can sometimes surprise you. That was how it was with my husband, the world-famous consulting detective Sherlock Holmes. 11 years after our first encounter, Sherlock and I finally found our inner peace. Our unconventional marriage and enduring love affair were fundamental to our happiness. As he often worked away in London, our acceptance of being apart was a form of intimacy that only enhanced our relationship. There were many astonishing aspects of my marriage to Sherlock Holmes, alias Lucas Lepori. He agreed to my request to remove the word obey from our marriage vows. Instead, he asked that I love and honor him, and I had no problem with that. "Why would I expect you to obey me?" he'd said. "You're my wife, not my servant." When we reaffirmed our vows, I knew for the first time what it was like to be in a loving marriage. Whatever people may think of Sherlock, he was never one to shirk his responsibilities. As a keen observer of human behavior, my husband's ability to assess complex situations and discern pragmatic paths was extraordinary. Like others, he was frequently perplexed by his critical views and egotism, although I knew it wasn't because of selfishness or conceit. To Sherlock, it was impersonal. His honesty was often perceived as insensitive, but there was nothing callous about that honesty. Even after being apart for long periods, we had this almost telepathic physical connection, maintaining our double life as Signor and Signora Sapori, like the tide ebbing and flowing. Life could be complex, exciting, and stimulating until unexplained moments brought out the dark side of one's behavior. My father, Alfred, used to say that disagreeable things happen to good people and vice versa. Who could lecture us on what's good, bad, or indifferent? My husband might have something to say on the matter. Over the years, I learned that the line between the present and future isn't a solid wall or a flimsy painted glass. Life's curtain could be closed at any time. Loyalty and integrity were precious commodities. Have you ever wondered what betrayal looked like? I often ask myself that question, and in the summer of 1906, I was about to find out. An incident was coming that would shake us to the core. Chapter 1, Irene Adler. Scherzi Veneziani, Venetian Frolics. The year 1906 started with so much promise. A few weeks earlier, Sherlock and I took a long overdue vacation at an idyllic villa in Venice overlooking the Adriatic Sea. Surprisingly, Sherlock's brother, Mycroft, extended the invitation. The house belonged to an old acquaintance, Derek Hamilton, who worked alongside Mycroft in Westminster and used the villa as a holiday home. Mr. Hamilton was away on business with the Foreign Office for the best part of a year and inquired if Mycroft wanted to use the place while he was away. Mycroft politely declined the invitation, blaming work pressures, but he said he had friends in Italy who would likely enjoy a break. It was a lovely, thoughtful gesture, but I suspected Mycroft was still trying to make amends for his machinations 11 years earlier and Fiesole, which forced Sherlock and me apart for over 4 years. However, after reconciliation at Christmas in 1904 at our farm on the Sussex Downs, relations significantly improved. That was also when Mycroft first met his niece and nephew, Nico and Charlotte. I felt excited when Sherlock accepted Mycroft's offer to use the villa. We deliberated over taking the children, but as my husband pointed out, Nico had important upcoming exams. So we left them in the capable hands of our trusted staff members, including their governess, Hildegard, whom the children adored and held in the highest regard. That was how I found myself on the first Friday in May, setting out on my train journey from Milano Centrale on a perfect spring morning. Sitting next to the window, I looked out at the changing landscape. The passing trees and distant localities shimmered in the glow of the morning sun against the backdrop of the vast Tuscan sky as the train gradually picked up speed. I closed my eyes momentarily as the rhythmic tugging and hissing filled the air with the bittersweet memories of nostalgia. It brought back poignant memories of a trip to Manhattan with my late father, Alfred, when I was 8. It was the first time I'd ever traveled on a train. My father died in 1895, just a few months before Nico was born. Unfortunately, he never got to see his grandchildren, although he left a canny proviso in his will. Touched by his kindness, I was determined to make my father's memory count. I set up a trust fund to honor him. The Alfred Adler Foundation was a charity and bursary that nurtured the skills and talents of musicians and singers from disadvantaged backgrounds and offered financial assistance. Over the years, the foundation had helped countless performing arts members realize their dreams. My father helped shape the person I am today. He encouraged my love of music and taught me how to play the piano, supporting my love of opera. He was such a kind, generous, and thoughtful soul, possessing qualities I could only aspire to emulate. 3 hours later, I arrived at Venezia Santa Lucia train station to find my husband's familiar sight waiting for me on the platform. Sherlock was attired in an ulster and cap, holding his valise in one hand and a cigarette in the other. I waved and smiled as those penetrating gray eyes fixed on me and gazed back with such warmth and affection. I walked towards my husband, the porter following close behind. I shook with delight as Sherlock wrapped his arms around me and holding me tightly. He kissed me gently on the lips, pushing the hair away from my face as I drank in his manly scent and the faint aroma of his cologne. Then he broke off our embrace, quickly summoning the porter to take care of our luggage as though nothing had happened between us. We took the ferry from Santa Lucia to San Zaccaria, hiring a gondolier to take us on the last leg of our journey to Chioggia, known as Little Venice. It was a picturesque fishing town with colorful houses, narrow streets, and a bustling market. We could only get to the town by boat from San Zaccaria or Fusina, and to be away from the madding crowd suited Sherlock and me just fine. We considered using the Vaporetto to complete our journey, but which Sherlock reasoned would have been much quicker, but I persuaded him that traveling by gondola would be far more adventurous and romantic. After checking with the gondolier to see if our luggage would fit, Sherlock agreed to my request. The gondolier was a diminutive, wiry fellow named Adamo, with an engaging smile and cheerful disposition. He navigated the boat effortlessly through the waterway of the Grand Canal, winding through the heart of the city, lined with historic palaces, churches, and bridges, making it a picturesque route. Finally, he docked outside our destination, located in its private and secluded setting. It was a quaint Venetian villa with Rigoletto charm that would be our home for the next 2 weeks. Adamo jumped out of the boat and took my hand to disembark before helping Sherlock carry our luggage into the villa. After receiving a handsome tip, the gondolier doffed his brightly colored straw hat and waved goodbye before proceeding with his journey. The house was bright, airy, and well appointed. It offered a good-sized galley kitchen with a larder to its rear, fully stocked with bread, cheese, antipasto, olives, fresh fruit, sweetbreads, and biscotti. Jugs of fresh milk, homemade lemonade, sugar, tea, and coffee were all at our disposal. There was a welcome note from a lady identifying as Mariette, waiting for us on the worktop. Mariette told us she would serve as our maid during our stay. We should expect her to come in daily to change the bedding and bring fresh towels. The lounge was large and beautifully decorated with white painted walls dotted with paintings of Italian landscapes. Sherlock helped me open the heavy blinds, revealing 2 large picture windows boasting spectacular sea views. A tufted leather settee, a chaise lounge, and 2 hard-backed chairs furnished the room, along with an ornate coffee table and a gramophone set in the corner. Next to the sitting area was a drinks cabinet fully stocked with whiskey, brandy, and port, and holding several bottles of Venetian red wine and champagne. We discovered a shelf underneath the cabinet having a fine selection of English cigarettes, shag tobacco, and Toscanello cigars. The main bedroom with ensuite was cozy and intimate. Its centerpiece was a 4-poster mahogany bed with matching furniture, the highly polished floors covered with handmade, richly colored Turkish kilim rugs. We entered the bathroom to discover paneled walls and a cork-tiled floor, boasting a walk-in shower, roll-top bath, a separate toilet, and a comprehensive selection of towels and toiletries. We walked outside, exploring the medium-sized garden with pots of spring flowers surrounding its borders. Next to several olive trees stood a raised area serving as a patio with a table and 4 comfortable-looking, stylish, natural wicker chairs with linen cushions, offering spectacular views over the commanding Adriatic Sea. All of this, the glorious weather and the sun beating down, caused me to sigh and reminisce. It reminded me of our time together at La Sole and Fiesole all those years ago. It was picture perfect, the ideal setting. A second honeymoon should differ from a more lavish or far-reaching holiday, staying in the grandest hotels, but here, in this humble yet exquisitely furnished villa in one of the most romantic cities in the world, my husband and I found the privacy we yearned for. After Sherlock and I unpacked, we decided not to go out, as we felt a little tired from the journey. Instead, I made a platter of cold food for each of us from the larder, which I took outside onto the patio, while Sherlock uncorked a bottle of champagne. At the same time, I placed a record on the gramophone. We sat gazing at the spectacular views, chatting quietly, eating our food, and sipping the delicious champagne with Beethoven's delightful minuet from his piano trio in C minor playing in the background. We retired early, around 9, taking our champagne upstairs. Physical tension intensified during the evening, like the third and fourth movements of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which built up to a remarkable crescendo. A shy stare, a nod, a knowing look in that magnificent setting stirred our senses. Frankly, I'd been looking forward to being flirted with, anticipating the thrill of his touch. Sherlock stroked the back of my neck, untying the pins in my hair as he'd done countless times before until my hair fell loose upon my shoulders. And then he gently turned me around to face him, pulling me onto the bed. I leaned in to kiss him, but instead, in a golden moment of vulnerability, my lover, husband, and best friend, cradled my face with his hands, lifted my chin, and gave me a soft, lingering kiss. Then he kissed me again, but the kiss was more urgent, making my head spin. An overwhelming urge to touch him washed over me. I unbuttoned his shirt, tracing my fingertips over the contours of his skin, taking in his masculine scent. Our eyes met as we explored each other. His sensitive fingers mastered my body like a concert violinist, each stroke sending shivers down my spine. We spent the remainder of the evening in a romantic dalliance as my husband made love to me with a haunting intensity that was simultaneously natural and sensual. Late as dusk descended, Sherlock lay asleep on the bed. I listened to my husband's soft breathing against the backdrop of the waves crashing onto the beach. I didn't want the night to end. I felt safe, loved, and protected here. I drifted into a delightful slumber with my husband's arms wrapped around me, my head upon his chest. Neither of us stirred until dawn, when we were awoken by the sun streaming in through the blinds, the chatter of the chaffinches, and the melodious, repetitive whistle of the blackbirds hopping from branch to branch in the olive trees. When I thought things couldn't improve, Sherlock surprised me at breakfast with 2 tickets for Giuseppe Verdi's Rigoletto to be performed at the La Finesse Grand Opera House later that evening. After disembarking from the Vaporetto at the Venice terminal, we took a cab to take us on the last leg of our journey to the theater. As the coach rattled down the narrow, winding streets, the rhythmic clip-clop of the horses' hooves against the cobblestone was music to my ears. The early evening sun cast its warm glow upon the city, gilding every stone and shadow alive with a golden, shimmering light that danced upon the canals. It caught the rippling reflections as we passed. The theater rose before us as a masterpiece of ornate stonework, resplendent in its grandeur, and it beckoned us forward. The impressive sign above the main theater door showing the rising bird above the gold words, Grand Teatro La Finesse, against a blue background was a striking feature. After La Scala, La Finesse was my favorite opera house. It was a scene perfectly orchestrated by nature and design, Venice at her most magnificent. Her charm was intoxicating as the finest wine, and one could scarcely resist the allure La Finesse presented on that fine May evening. The faint scent of salt and sea lingered in the air, mingling with the heady aroma of blooming jasmine and freshly baked pastries from the remaining colorful market stalls still open nearby. Merchants were engaged in lively conversation, their voices rising and falling in the customary rhythm of negotiations. Elegant Venetians strolled towards the theater, their laughter and voices carried on the gentle breeze. Well-dressed gentlemen and ladies paused in their promenades to look with mild curiosity at our coach. The crowd's soft murmur enveloped as we descended and entered the theater, blending with a violinist's harmonious yet faint low strains serenading outside a nearby cafe. Over the years, I'd had the privilege of treading the boards at the prestigious venue, following in the footsteps of the great and the good, those iconic performers who had walked before me. Antonio Selva designed the opera house, which was classically elegant. His grand facade featured stylish columns, a sweeping staircase, and ornate furnishings. Inside, visitors marveled at frescoes, gilded moldings, and crystal chandeliers. Tragically, the great opera house burned down in 1836 due to a faulty heater. Fire brigade took 3 days to extinguish the fire, and the smoldering hotspots remained for 15 days. La Finesse was rebuilt in record time and reopened just 1 year later. Over the years, the opera house has hosted many renowned composers, such as Rossini, Verdi, and Wagner. Its acoustics were amongst Europe's finest, making it a premier opera and classical music venue. My husband looked striking that night in his tailcoat, cummerbund, white shirt, black tie, and top hat. I wore an emerald green silk dress with a silver tiara, a matching bag, and shoes. The world premiere of the iconic opera Rigoletto was launched in 1851 at La Finesse, so it felt like the opera had come full circle. Judging by the polished performances of the ensemble cast, the production was still as fresh and commanding as it had always been. I marveled at the humanity in that theater as the power of the singer's bold tones soared into the rafters of the auditorium, and the thrilled audience shrieked with delight. This dramatic journey of undeniable force has always been one of my favorites. The story is based on the controversial 1832 play La Roi Semeuse by Victor Hugo, the French writer and politician, who became famous for such literary classics as Les Miserables and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The play was banned from the public performance for 50 years as it was said to include insulting references to King Louis Philippe of France. Our good friend Enrico Caruso made his American debut in Rigoletto on the opening night of the Metropolitan Opera House in New York in 1903, having made his London debut in the same opera at Covent Garden the previous year. Enrico played the Duke of Mantua and made best-selling recordings of the arias Questa Quella and La Donna Immobile. Rigoletto tells the tale of an outsider, a hunchbacked jester who struggles to balance the dual elements of beauty and evil in his life, writing splendidly during the most fertile period of Verdi's artistic life while at the peak of his lyrical powers. The opera resonates with the universality frequently described by many as Shakespearean. I've always thought that the music's evocative power was most significant when heard in live performances. The ensemble cast did nothing to prove me wrong. Tears streamed down my face as I sat spellbound watching this spectacular production and holding my breath as the emotionally charged dramatic ending neared its thrilling climax. It's in a scene-stealing performance. Rigoletto sang a heartbreaking duet with Gilda, his dying daughter. It was unbelievably tense, combining melancholy, serenity, and tragedy in one great improvisation that lingered in the memory. Even though I knew what was coming in every word of the song, it was still a scene that got to me every time I watched it performed. So many of us have experienced immeasurable heartache and despair at some point in our lives, and to me, the magnitude of those feelings, that unbearable pain, was splendidly encapsulated into the sound of opera. Nothing compared. Sherlock slipped his hand into mine, and tears of happiness rolled down my face. "Thank you. What a treat," I whispered. "My great pleasure," he replied, smiling at me greatly. The next few days flew by in a haze. We explored every corner of the city, feeding my husband's bohemian tendencies. Rather than booking into fancy restaurants, we preferred to make the most of our time together. We ate suppers outside under the tranquil moonlight with the sea almost on our doorstep. We enjoyed picnics during the day, walking barefoot on the beach, swam in the Mare Adriatic, part of the Mediterranean Sea, and drank copious amounts of wine, lying on a blanket in the sand by the shore, reading and chatting. We laughed as we observed the gulls flying overhead, screeching and singing in the glare of the afternoon sun, marveling at the golden facade and the place's inherent beauty. I felt at one with the entire cosmos. When we returned from the beach the following morning, we finally met our elusive maid, Mariette. She was a lovely lady around 35, tall and slim, with twinkling brown eyes and blonde hair tied back in a ponytail. Mariette apologized for interrupting, explaining that she lived nearby and purposely came in late mornings to avoid disturbing our privacy. 2 days before the end of our vacation, Sherlock and I embarked on a half-day lagoon boat tour of Burano and Murano. The former was famous for its colorful buildings, while Murano was renowned for glassmaking. Both were perfect locations to escape the crowds of tourists. After exploring the island streams, we visited the market square, where we watched the artisans at work and rummaged through the stalls while I bought gifts for the children. Sherlock knew I wanted to visit the San Zaccaria Church and the Corner Museum. San Zaccaria's church was on the waterfront southeast of Piazza San Marco. It was a former 15th century monastic church in the Campo San Zaccaria and St. Mark's Basilica. The church was dedicated to St. Zachariah, the father of John the Baptist. Its apse was surrounded by an ambulatory lit by tall Gothic windows, a typical feature of Northern European church architecture unique to Venice. Nearly every wall was covered with paintings by 17th and 18th century artists. However, the most famous painting was from much earlier, the masterpiece San Zaccaria altarpiece. It was an oil on-panel painting by the Italian Renaissance artist Giovanni Bellini, who completed the stunning artwork in 1505. Sherlock and I agreed that we would return with the children, if not later that year, then the following summer. We even talked about buying a holiday home in the vicinity. Everything was perfect until we came home. Little did we know that there would be a price to pay for our fleeting contentment, a painful reminder that nothing lasts forever, least of all happiness. And no one could have prepared us for what happened later that summer, the abduction of our beloved Nico. As my husband said, the whistle of revenge blows long and cold.